Take a smartphone that's already one of the best in the price segment and add a yesteryear flagship chipset to it. Sounds like an easy formula for success, doesn't it? But is that all there is to the F62 from Samsung, as essentially it's a Galaxy M51 with an Exynos 9825 from 2019's Galaxy Note 10 instead of the 730G Snapdragon from the M51? Let us find out in this review. This is Sandeep from RevAtlas, and let's get the review of the Samsung Galaxy F62 started. I love the M51, and in fact I didn't expect to like it as much as I did. The screen was beautiful, the battery life was stellar, and the overall handling was good despite having a massive 7000 mAh battery, and cameras were good, although not great. So let's see how changing the heart of the phone affects all that, or whether it remains the same but better. The F62 features the same 6.7-inch Super AMOLED panel with Full HD Plus resolution and 20:9 aspect ratio. Now, considering the huge 7000 mAh battery under the hood, I would say that this is very manageable and doesn't really cause any strain to your hands due to weight or dimensions. It's all down to the weight distribution, which Samsung has got on point here as well. Despite weighing in at 218 grams, it feels more or less on par with similar sized phones, say with a 5000 mAh battery, and Samsung does deserve a pat on the back for that. At 9.5mm, it is thicker than most phones, but I feel that a phone that is heavier needs a thicker waistline for better grip. Samsung have used plastic, by the way, for the back panel, and while it isn't an excuse to avoid using glass, if they had done so, the weight would have gone up even further. While the M51 attracted a lot of fingerprints as well, this is an absolute smudge magnet, and the back to me looks rather too busy. Now, I did find the M51 to be a bit too plain, and I wished for a gradient or a pattern. Now on this you get both. I would have enjoyed either the gradient or the stripe pattern, but having both, plus being a fingerprint magnet, it looks too busy for my liking. Our unit is called Laser Blue, but you can also get it in green and grey variants, and I feel that the grey is the best as it isn't overdone, but whichever one you choose, make sure to get a case or skin, as this also picks up scratches very easily, and even without that, the smudges itself are a reason enough to cover it up. The camera hump receives a slight cosmetic change, and this is a squarish setup compared to the elongated one on the M51, which I actually prefer. But the internals remain the same. A primary 64MP f1.8 camera, secondary 12MP ultra-wide, and two 5MP cameras, one for depth sensing and the other for macro. At the front, housed within a display cutout in the center, is the 32MP front-facing camera as well. Compared to the M51, the camera performance seems to be better, but again not by a huge margin to make it the best in the segment. It seems to get several things right, including the color, better dynamic range, and slightly better detail and sharpness. Then again, a side-by-side comparison would have been the best, but unfortunately I don't have the M51 with me anymore. Either way, we'll be doing a detailed camera review, so do stay tuned for that to understand more. The side-mounted fingerprint scanner on board, which is fairly fast and responsive, but the face unlock feature for some reason is a hit or miss. I've had many instances where it failed to recognize my face, despite there being no differences in appearance compared to the face that I had registered when I set it up. The major difference between the F62 and M51 is the chipset under the hood. Exynos 9825 was used in 2019 in the Galaxy Note 10 devices, and it was and still is pretty powerful. However, I expected to see a bigger difference in performance, be it for multitasking or for gaming, compared to the 730G. The difference isn't what you would call hugely tangible unless you use them side by side for heavy applications or games, and the other way to tell them apart is by looking at benchmark scores, which are synthetic at best. The regular daily use cases have more or less the same performance, and even on the F62 there are slight stutters or sluggish moments in the UI, which is perfectly acceptable to be honest at this price range, but not what you would expect when someone says this comes with a flagship processor. The F62 comes with Android 11 with One UI 3 out of the box, and the UI overall is very good. Battery life is one area where I expected there to be the biggest difference apart from performance, and the reason for this is that I've seen Exynos powered devices generally to be less power efficient than their Snapdragon powered counterparts. Essentially, it gives around 70% or so of the Snapdragon variant in terms of the efficiency. So in essence, I was expecting this to perform similar to a 5000 mAh smartphone, and that's exactly what happened here as well. I got around 8 hours of screen on time compared to 12 plus hours of screen on time on the M51 variant. That's around 66% of the total battery life that I got on the M51, which is a big difference considering that with the same battery and the only variable being the chipset here, it still has lower end battery life. The battery takes around 2.5 hours for a full charge using their 25 watt charger, and this also supports reverse charging. The M51 from Samsung was a great phone back in the day, and it could last 2 days of heavy use, while the F62 can last 1 day of heavy use and 1.5 days of moderate use. The cameras are, yes, a bit better due to the superior ISP, but then again it's not as good as what you would get from Gcam mods, so that's also not really a major benefit. And lastly, the performance is good, but the benefits from the 9825 look great theoretically, but practically speaking it's not a day and night difference. At the end of the day, I would still pick up the M51 itself, as the advantage of having much better battery life outweighs the slightly better performance that the F62 gives.